back with another episode of the PCC Multiverse. This is Gerald Glassford coming right back at you here from Pop Culture Cosmos, Game Source, Inside Sports Fantasy Football, and the Lakers Fast Break. We truly appreciate everyone out there listening to all of our great shows. And if you can, please give us that magical 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts. Plus, if you could like, share, subscribe, follow, or do whatever it is that you can to support us right here at the Pop Culture Cosmos, Game Source, Inside Sports Fantasy Football, the Lakers Fast Break, Vampires, and Vitae, the Wizards of Wine with Wild Beyond the Witchlight, and so much more. Plus, also as well, you can catch the latest news and trends in pop culture each and every day at Pop Culture Cosmos on Facebook, plus some really in-depth looks at the world of pop culture, a really truly in-depth look at the world of pop culture right there for you at popculturecosmos.wordpress.com. And if you could do all that, you could like, share, and subscribe. It is sincerely appreciated. But it wouldn't be a PCC Multiverse without my good friend. She is the hostess with the mostest. It is a good friend indeed. You got to go ahead and catch what she's doing today as she terrorizes her husband, Robbie Ross, each and every time out on Vampires of Vitae. And of course, the Wizards of Wine with Wild Beyond the Witchlight, Demolition Force, every Monday right there for you, and so much more. Also, Reckless Moves. She gives her husband a whole bunch of grief there. So check all of that out today if you're into tabletop RPG action. It is the awesome Melinda Barkhouse Ross. And Melinda, you asked me this. Hey, Gerald, we need to do a concept show. So I said, sure, what kind of concept show? You said, let's play 3 questions. That's right. That's right, indeed. So great to have you here, my friend. How's everything been going for you?
No, everything is going pretty good. So, do you ever have those weeks, Gerald, where just technology is not working for you and it doesn't seem to matter what you do? It's just not going to be your friend. Have you ever gone through a little
That's every
period of
week.
that?
That's every week for me.
Well, that's definitely how Monday went. So, in my wisdom, I decided it would be better if I was in a happy mindset than a frustrated one when we came to the Wild Beyond the Witchlight with the Las Vegas table this past Monday. So, we didn't stream, but we did record. And, Les now has Strad as a patron, so that's
Okay.
a development in the game, which is going to last for years because we do plan on this being a long term campaign with many parts to it. But we also saw a true demonstration of Strahd's power. And we also um, really understand that every time you ask Strahd for something, it comes with a very high cost. So it was a really interesting episode, and I'm gonna get back to editing this week. So we're gonna have episodes dropping on a very regular basis again, very very soon. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was a completely off book, and I am building my confidence in the arena of homebrewing by just every once in a while having an episode that I've homebrewed. And I think this one went over really well. And I'm just excited to get the audio out so people can hear it and I can get that feedback that's so important as a DM.
Not to go ahead and elaborate on this, sorry, part of the pun for the bad D&D joke coming up, but your bad week technology-wise, was it because you were touched by the curse of Strahd? Oh, that was an awesome fake laugh. Yeah,
Ah.
that was bad, sorry.
No, but it was a really good episode. It was a lot of fun to put together, and I'm excited to get it out into the world and see what people think of the decisions that were made around the table. Very cool episode.
That was a very insider D&D joke, just wanna let you know.
Yeah.
So, I just it was there. It was ripe for the taking, and
Yes.
speaking of corn, because that was very corny, we got
Hmm.
some things that we're going to go ahead and touch on. But the first thing is get your popcorn out because the first question in our 3 questions for today, because you asked me to come up with 3 questions.
Yes.
All right. What movies do you believe will connect with audiences coming up this spring? And that means the next couple of months because we've got some things coming up. Scream just happened, Scream 6. Obviously that's done very well out there in the box office. This weekend, as this is being dropped, you've got some other stuff that's coming out that are really, really interesting to see. You got Shazam, Fury of the Gods. You've got obviously the week after that, you've got Dungeons and Dragons. That's coming out pretty soon. Honor Among Thieves. That's coming out. Excuse me. That's coming out at the end of this month. John Wick Chapter 4 is coming in between. So the next 3 weeks, because Scream 6 has already happened, you've got Shazam Fury of the Gods. You've got John Wick Chapter 4, and you've got Dungeons and Dragons Honor Among Thieves. But I want to stave off the Dungeons and Dragons talk because that's part of another question that's coming up down the road. But when it comes to those first two hits, because there are obviously some other movie releases that are coming out. Luther the Fallen Sun, 65, which came out, and I don't think it got the greatest reception in the world for Adam Driver. I know that was a great paycheck movie for him, but I'm worried about where his career is going after this because this is definitely a paycheck movie for him. We've got also as well, lining up against Shazam, Fury of the Gods. You've got Inside, Wildflower, Pinball, The Man Who Saved the Game. Those are some nice smaller movies that are coming out as well alongside it. And at the end of the month, you've got some other stuff alongside John Wick Chapter 4 and Dungeons and Dragons. But Tetris is probably the one that intrigues me most, but that's more like an Apple Plus adventure as opposed to just being introduced on screen with Taron Egerton detailing or dramatizing the beginnings of Tetris. But I'm asking you this, and actually, we're going to touch on Tetris later on in the program on another question because it relates to it. What are your thoughts on movies you think will connect with audiences this spring? We'll start off with the rest of this month. I mean, it starts off with Shazam, Fury of the Gods. This is a movie that I think I don't want to say it's been sent to die per se, but in that big hullabaloo that was talked about by James Gunn, the new head of DC going forwards, along with Peter Safran as a co-CEO for this, he didn't touch on this very much. Didn't really, elaborate too much on it. Didn't really show much enthusiasm. It was all about the Flash, the Flash, the Flash. That doesn't bode well for Shazam: Fury of the Gods. The initial reactions have it as okay. Again, similar to what we saw the first time around. Could this be the end of the Shazam IP and Shazam as a character for Zachary Levi? Could it be something that they might go ahead and maybe remodel or redo? Because I don't have high hopes for this movie going forward.
And I think that a lot of people are with you on that. I don't think it's the fault of the actor. I think he's been fine in the role.
Mhm.
I just don't know that people care about Shazam all
Yeah.
that much. And I think that that's the real struggle with this Phase 4 for Marvel is now you're getting into characters that are deep, deep, deep lore for Marvel, and you're a lot of it has to start with origin movies because people need to understand who these characters are and why they need to think about them. You can't just present them in a movie, you know?
And then phase 5 now for Ant-Man and the Wasp. But when it comes to
Right.
DC, this has been scattershot the way they've done this so far. And now James Gunn
Yeah.
wants to go ahead and get all these old projects that are already been filmed or already in production, want to get that out of the way so he can bring his gods and monsters phase after that. But this is going to be a movie I think that unfortunately, this a few movie series, a couple movies that were really never given enough love by Warner Brothers because I think that even though like you said, it's not been a very marketable character, it's still been a very fun movie overall.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that they're not enjoyable to watch, but in terms of people going and spending money at the box office, which is super important. I think a lot of people are just waiting on that one to be able to stream it from home, where they can not spend $27 on a large tub of popcorn and a small soda.
Yeah. It's just not the kind of movie that you think it's going to be right now really worth spending that kind of dough. And that's something I think that's very sad because we've seen earlier this month with the great success for Creed 3, which really
Hmm.
popped some good numbers, and Scream 6 was also popped some good numbers, that this may or may not follow up in that same fashion. I think people are pointing towards a movie in March, and all blessings to Dungeons and Dragons Honor Among Thieves, which I will be going to. There's also a movie that I also want to see, and I think a lot of people want to see, a movie series that has grown in intensity over the past 2, 3 iterations now. It's in its fourth iteration, and that is John Wick Chapter 4. A lot of people are excited for this film. They've heard pretty good advance word on it. A lot of people are excited for it. You know, you're going to get a lot of action. You're going to get a lot of Keanu Reeves brooding all over the place. Just leave me alone. Just want to, don't want to kill anymore. Just want to just go home. You know, chill with my dog. Maybe drive my fancy high-powered car, my muscle car around all over the place. But this is a movie. Besides that, it's become a globe trotting adventure because with original John Wick, it was a lower budget, less of a gamble film, but it has evolved with the budgets getting larger and larger because the success has been there consistently. Your thoughts on John Wick Chapter 4 with Keanu Reeves reprising the role, and it looks like it's not going to slow down anytime soon.
Yeah, it's 100% the movie that's gonna get me back into the movie theaters. It's going to do that. Robbie and I went to see John Wick 3 in theaters,
Mhm.
and I can see that being, a thing that we just continue to do. I can remember watching, the first John Wick movie on Netflix. I didn't go to the movie this or to the theater to see it because I had read really terrible reviews about it. So I just kinda sat down, on the couch and popped it on the TV, and I was on the edge of my couch for that
It's a good
entire
movie.
movie. It's
It
so
is a good,
good.
yeah.
And what's wonderful is they continue to crank out the same level of intensity, and they're finding interesting ways to keep you engaged in the IP, which I think is interesting.
I thought 1 and 2, I thought 2 is the best, 1 is really good, 3 is okay. I thought there was some contrivedness and some staged things that really didn't flatter the movie as well. I think that to me was, a still okay movie, but I didn't find it as good as the first two films. But that doesn't temper my enthusiasm because, again, if I've had good experiences 2 out of 3 times, I'm really looking forward to betting on the fact that this could be a great time the fourth time around.
Yeah, absolutely. 2 out of 3 ain't bad, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, and then also you've got the success of it is leading to spin-offs with the Continental, which details the beforehand of the famous hotel or sanctuary for a lot of these individuals that are engaging in that lifestyle of the hitman, hitwoman type of lifestyle. And then you've got so much more, I think, is left in the John Wick universe that could be even detailed even more. I still think that there will be a John Wick Chapter 5 if this pops even a decent number. I still think there's no slowing it down, but the advanced wording, the advanced ticket sales suggests that it could be a really good hit, at least for the first weekend for John Wick.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the John Wick movies are giving us an opportunity to take a bit of a break. I think from going to the movie theaters and watching more comic book movies. And I'm not saying that any kind of way to take any kind of shot at going to see a comic book movie. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm trying to
Mhm.
say is John Wick, um, arguably, is just a dude who got pulled back into this crazy lifestyle that he's living. And I'm not saying that we can all imagine ourselves as John Wick, but I'm kind of saying it's easier to imagine yourself as John Wick than it is to imagine yourself as, let's say, Superman or Thor, for example.
I will
So I
say
think
the
that there's
next.
there's there's
Oh
something
no, go
like
ahead.
I don't know if altruistic is the word that I want to use,
Mhm.
but there's just something that you know gives you the opportunity with movies that are just like dudes going out and doing a thing, and I'm
Mhm.
saying dudes to encompass all genders there. So, um, it's just finally feels refreshing to see somebody with achievable and attainable goals go out and do a thing that with the training we could do, but if you're like Superman, you're not gonna fly.
Yeah.
So it's hard to kind of put yourself in those kinds of stories, in those kinds of situations.
Well, this is the true meaning of a blockbuster.
Yeah,
A
absolutely.
series that grew up from a low budget, low expectations, exceeding those expectations greatly, getting granted a sequel with a little bit more cash that exceeded expectations. Then you have John Wick Chapter 3 given a little bit more cash. And despite what I said about it, it still earned a ton of cash and exceeded expectations at the box office. So it has exceeded expectations at the box office each and every time out. So definitely looking forward to seeing now that the bar has been set higher. It is not a true $1 to $200 million blockbuster yet, but it's darn close. So it needs to start thinking about doing that 50, 75, $100 million opening in order to justify its continuous as a series.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I really think that chapter 4 is going to be another one that they have expectations. It's going to exceed that by a little bit. I think that it is going to be the movie that people talk about for 2, maybe even 3 weeks after the movie is premiered to the worldwide audience. So I'm expecting good things coming out of this John Wick movie.
After that, though, it is the week after at the end of March. It is Dungeons and Dragons Honor Amongst Thieves, and I will be checking out this movie. This to me is the wild card in this equation. I have no idea how well it's going to perform financially. Even if it gets bad reviews or even decent reviews or good reviews, I'm not even sure how well it's going to do because will people not necessarily involved or interested in tabletop RPG gaming, will they go to it and see it as a fun fantasy level movie? Is there still a draw for fantasy movies? That's what I think the key is. I think this is a fun, interesting, lighthearted movie that I'm going to most likely enjoy. I really was looking forward to it. Just I don't know why. Maybe it's because Chris Pine is playing more of a Captain Kirk Star Trek type character, and I'm wisecracking and the whole gang is there just trying to go off. And are they actually trying to save the world, or are they just trying to one up each other? Those type of things that I like, that chemistry that they have in the short amount of time I've seen it. And I know we're going to discuss this a little bit more when we talk about our second question, but this to me is the wild card as far as how well it's going to perform. I have no idea how well it's going to perform. Usually I have a good idea. Usually I have a good perception on that. Usually I've, Josh has noted to me, and I've been pretty good as far as seeing if whether a movie is going to be a success or not. But with this movie, I don't know how well it's going to translate to a larger audience than D&D hardcores.
I think it's going to have a pretty wide appeal. I think the movie is going to do okay. I don't think it's going to be something that breaks a box office or anything like that. I think it's going to do all right, and I think it's going to be welcoming enough to an audience that might not be super familiar with D&D, but I think it's going to have enough of those inside jokes for those D&D players to go and see the movie and find the humor and part of being part of that inner circle that understands why seeing a mimic do what a mimic does is kind of funny. So I think that people are going to enjoy it on very different levels, but I think the movie is just going to do okay. I think the streaming numbers for this movie are going to be crazy, to be honest.
I agree with you. If promoted properly, I think it
Yeah.
will have a nice run on streaming. Again, I'm not sure how well it's going to do financially up front, so that's going to be very interesting to see, especially the fact that less than a week later, you've got not one but two pretty good contenders coming out of the gate with Super Mario Brothers movie, which Universal has a lot of high hopes on. Nintendo has a lot of high hopes on. Chris Pratt aside, and also Air with Ben Affleck and Matt Damon. I've actually gone on record to say I'm not exactly thrilled to see Matt Damon in the role of Sonny Vaccaro, who is the scout that not discovered Michael Jordan per se, but actually lined up Michael Jordan with Nike so that the creation of the Air Jordan brand could come into fruition. I'm not exactly with him being placed in his role because if you knew Sonny Vaccaro, the scout in real life, it's nowhere near what Matt Damon. But then again, Ben Affleck, Matt Damon, they're best friends, whatever. Most of the people don't know this, so they're probably going to go ahead and get beyond that little thing I said. But that movie is in question as far as how well it's going to do because it may not cater to a general audience as well unless it gets really high marks as far as a drama, as far as a critical reception is concerned. So I have no idea how that movie is going to do as well. But the Super Mario Brothers movie, I know is going to kill it in that weekend. I don't know if it'll totally dust over Dungeons and Dragons in Air, but I have a feeling it's going to do very well. It's going to be very front loaded. A lot of people are excited. I don't see the same type of ending or scenario that this movie will get that as opposed to 30 years ago plus when the last time Nintendo tried to make a Mario Brothers film and put that on screen. I think I see a much better financial happy ending for this film than that one.
I hope so. I hope that Super Mario it does well. I think that there's a level of nostalgia now where there may not have been with the previous movie. I think that we may be coming into another cycle of everything old is new again. Like the low rise pants are coming
Well,
back
that
from the
movie was
90s.
just
Oh my God.
bad. That
Yeah, of
live
course it
action, that
was.
was a live action failure. I mean, it has now been thought of now as a cult film because a lot of people have now seen it because they just, it's so bad, it's good type of deal. So the reason why it bombed was because it was just plainly a bad film.
Right, but I do think that there is a streak of nostalgia that's kind of coming back around again right now, and I think it is going to be a situation of right movie, right time
Mhm.
for that one. So I think it's going to do pretty good.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. Air, like I said, I don't know what kind of audience will go see it because the audiences that have in the past gone to see dramas of this type have not come back as strong after the pandemic than what was once there. So I don't know how well it's going to do in a box office format. But again, like we are talking about with Dungeons and Dragons, we could see a nice little bump up in streaming simply because of Ben Affleck and Matt Damon. So we'll see. Absolutely.
Yeah,
We'll see.
I think that's fair. That's fair. That's fair. Um, I'm excited, and I know it's not the main point of the movie, but I'm so excited to see Nick Cage as Dracula for
Oh,
Renfield that I
absolutely.
can I can barely stand myself. I'm so
And
excited
that's
to see
coming
that.
up on the 14th of April. So we're into
Yeah.
April right now. We already talked about Super Mario Brothers and Air, which are coming out on the 5th. I know we're bypassing Paint with Owen Wilson, which is a Bob Ross parody per se. And I'm not sure everybody's really going to get into that. The Pope's Exorcist with Russell Crowe. Those Paint and the Pope's Exorcist are coming out on the 7th, and I have a feeling they're both going to get blown away by the Super Mario Brothers movie, and also Air, and also Dungeons and Dragons, and also John Wick Chapter 4, and even people that might even still be seeing Shazam. So those movies are probably going to be waiting to do more on streaming as well. But Renfield, like you said, Nicolas Cage, Nicholas Holt in a Nicholas movie with Aquafina, Renfield, the story. I find this interesting because it does approach the Dracula motif in a probably a different slant than we've ever seen before, similar to what the series was with Alfred. And they looked at his backstory as opposed to Batman's sidekick or Batman's butler. They looked at his story for over 3 seasons. they're looking at Renfield and more of his relationship and how he came to become the right hand individual for Dracula. So I have a feeling with your vampires and vitae background, you're looking forward to this, like I believe you said. So I think you're looking forward to this as well.
I am, yeah. I mean, and for a number of reasons. I'm always going to support, a vampire movie in theaters because I, obviously impartial, but I'm so excited just to see Nicolas Cage completely unhinged in this movie. If he
Mhm.
doesn't go like top tier level 10 Nicolas Cage in the role of Dracula, I'm going to be so horrifyingly disappointed. I want to see Nick Cage be as Nick Cage as possible in this movie.
I'll tell you, I think it's going to be wild. I think it's going to be
Mhm.
crazy. He did make some statements recently about how life is not going to be over for him, even though he's a comic book geek. In fact, his stage name, Nick Cage, came from
Mhm.
Luke Cage. That if he doesn't ever get it part of a Marvel Cinematic Universe turn or his character as Ghost Rider is never brought back, he said life is not over for him. So he didn't seem too disappointed on that. So it'll be interesting to see, now that there's a full Nick Cage renaissance, how well Renfield does as it matches up. The rest of the month is devoted to a little bit more horror and a little bit more drama. Evil Dead Rise, The Covenant with Jake Gyllenhaal. There's I guess maybe you say Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret with Rachel McAdams.
Yeah, don't
Not
forget,
a
On a Wing and a Prayer as well with, Dennis Quaid. I think that one's gonna do pretty well.
Yeah, that I think so because it caters to a religious audience, and those religious movies,
Yeah.
similar to what we see with anime movies and some other movies, they're very front loaded. So you can see
Mhm.
some success right around the Easter market for that. So I agree with you on that. But nothing really stands out as a big box office hit until we get to Guardians of the Galaxy. So that's something we're going to go ahead and touch on in a summer movie preview in the upcoming weeks, because definitely the summer movie season is definitely going to be upon us by then. But any last thoughts on some surprises or some standouts before we head on out for the months of whatever's left of March and into April?
I really do. I just feel like the Renfield movie, I don't know how much, the studios are is, like, banking on this movie. I've got a funny feeling that it's gonna do a lot better than it's expected to. And I'm not
Especially
sure why I feel that way. Maybe it's just because of the Nick, Cage renaissance that's happening, but I just feel like it's gonna do really, really well.
Well, it's placed a lot better than the Shazams and the Dungeons and
Mm.
Dragons of the world because you have, as we mentioned, Shazam, John Wick, Dungeons and Dragons, Super Mario Brothers, back to back to back to back. And then by the time Renfield comes out, that's the middle of April. So you have like maybe 2 weeks to go ahead and capitalize if it's good and people catch on to it before Guardians of the Galaxy hits. So that could be something you are very correct on. So it does have a window of opportunity laid out to it.
Yeah, fingers are crossed anyway.
Absolutely. Fingers are crossed indeed. But if you have thoughts on the movies coming up over the next 6 weeks, please let us know. We'd love to hear your thoughts on everything going on within the realm of movies and your opinions on what's hot and what's not. Please let us know your thoughts. Popculturecosmos at yahoo.com. Well, that's one question down, my friend. You said to come up with three questions. So, a second question I have for you is the one you want to get into most and the one you want to talk about most. So, we talked a little bit about it as far as the Dungeons and Dragon movie is concerned. And that is after the scandal and controversy that ended, I guess, early February, I'd say. That
Yeah,
was
that's
that
fair.
took over January, late December, about the controversy with Hasbro, Wizards of the Coast, and Dungeons and Dragons, and how they wanted to go ahead and reshape the future of Dungeons and Dragons and in many ways for continuing and playing the series. They had to obviously take a step back, a big step back, a running step back,
Mhm.
I almost felt like they had to do a backflip because they had to do so much stepping back on it. They tried to make amends. They've tried to walk back everything that they said and did or was hinting at because it was actually originally a leak that started all this and went downhill from there. Has the Dungeons and Dragons IP, which has been a cornerstone of the tabletop RPG industry for the past 40 years plus, has that name been irreparably damaged?
This is a tough question. And it's a tough question for a lot of reasons. The things that we learned during the OGL, I'm going to call just refer to it as a fiasco. During the fiasco,
Mhm.
um, it became very clear that their plans for 1 D&D, which is the next kind of iteration of D&D that's coming out, is really going to take Dungeons and Dragons from a paper, pen, pencil, sitting around a table with your friends game and turn it into a largely digital situation. And
And I
they're
can't say I blame them for seeing it that way.
yeah, no, and like I said, and I've said all along, nobody is upset at a company for wanting to make money off of a piece of property that they
Or
own.
seeing
Nobody
the future.
oh, right, yeah. So, they're gonna have their own virtual tabletop, which is great. It's gonna be wonderful. And they're gonna continue to make improvements to D&D Beyond, which they purchased as I think kind of the first indicator that they're looking at going largely digital. I have heard that they're not going to be publishing books once 1 D&D becomes the version of the game that they're working on. I don't know how much of that is true. A lot of it
I think
is
they
rumor right
will, but
now.
they may have digital exclusives
Yeah,
because it
that
is costly for them to publish out those nice hardcover books. As we talked about with our friends from Freely Publishing, and I gave to you all those sweet starter kits for all those different tabletop RPG games. It is something where you see where it gets costly, it gets expensive to create those. So I could see digital formats just similar like we see in the video game world. Some games will come out in a hard copy, some games will just come out digital only.
Yeah, but I do think that the way that it looks like they're taking Dungeons and Dragons is to take it and turn it into largely and solely digital product and game and experience, and that's fine because with the kind of players that's going to continue to attract to the game are very comfortable playing in that digital world, and because of COVID, when that happened, a lot of people just switched to digital platforms, and a lot of people never went back to sitting around a table with a
Well, how
pencil
did
and
we
paper.
meet? How did we meet?
Yeah,
How did you, Robbie, and I meet? How did Roger and I start Demolition Force? How did we meet in the first place? It was all digital.
it's so funny that now I think we're 3 years in, and there are still people that I play online with on a regular basis, and you know this as well, that we just have never met in person, but you know them
Yeah.
so well because you've spent hours upon hours, of game time with them.
But
But
and you could play with people all around the world that you couldn't play with before. I mean, Mitch,
yeah,
he's always talked about such a great DM and he's done such a great job with his games, but he has regular players what in South Africa, in
yep,
Europe,
mhm,
you've had regular players in Europe before, all around the world, all around the country, Canada.
yep.
Every week you see people in Canada that you interact and play a game with. So it's something I guess that's an evolvement of the actual IP. I don't think it'll go 100% away from the hardcover format. I just think it's asking too much, especially for something as far as something that is rooted so much in a tabletop, everybody come together at the house type experience. I think it will always have some of that, but I do see, like you, a vast majority of it going online digital just because of the worldwide experiences you can now have.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that that's the long way of just saying I think that Dungeons and Dragons is changing and evolving right now. And I think that the things that people were upset about with the OGL and continuing to make third party content stuff like
The
that.
OGL stands for Open Gaming License, just to let everybody know.
Right, yeah. So I think that a lot of that is going to stay focused on 5e and previous editions of Dungeons and Dragons. I think And if I was Hasbro, this is probably how I would do it, so I can't even be upset about it. But I think with all of the new stuff that I do for 1D&D, it would be under a very strict um open license, if I had an open license for it at all, for the ability for people to go ahead and create third party content. I think I would make that much more difficult, but go ahead and open up all of the previous stuff. That seems to be kind of what they've done, I think. And um, I don't know how many people that have been playing 5e, 3.5, 4e, the first edition of the game. I don't know how many of those people are truly going to buy into a almost exclusively digital experience with Dungeons and Dragons. So I what I'm trying to say is I do think that there it was a great deal of harm done to the Dungeons and Dragons experience, not experience, but the Dungeons and Dragons IP, but I don't think that it was enough for the casual player to really care that much. The people that were upset about this the most, I think, were third party creators, people who podcast, people who live stream, and I think that the casual player who's not interested in doing a podcast, who's not part of a live stream, who really does just want to sit around and tell some jokes and get into some shenanigans with their friends. I don't think that they are really the people who are out looking for new gaming systems to adapt and adopt and bring into their homes and at their tables. I think that D&D is going to continue to be strong because it is your gateway drug into the tabletop world. It just is. It's the most well known. It's 5e made it so easy to learn and so easy to run a game as a DM. And I think that 1D&D and D and the elimination really of the role of a dungeon master, and you can go on and you can play Dungeons and Dragons by yourself. You don't even have to have a group anymore. I think that that's going to continue to appeal to people as Dungeons and Dragons takes on this next evolution. But I think there is damage that has been done to the IP, and I think that those who buy into the digital stuff for Dungeons and Dragons are the people who are not as um, aware of exactly what these changes that they were trying to do to the OGL really meant to the overall community.
Once again, it's the Pop Culture Cosmos, the PCC Multiverse, that is. And Melinda's here answering three questions. Hopefully, a lot better than I can because I had a little bit of trouble trying to figure out the answer myself because Dungeons and Dragons has been so well known for the past 40 years. And like you said,
Yeah.
it is a gateway drug into a larger realm of tabletop RPG. All the games that you've played outside of Dungeons and Dragons have a world of debt to go ahead and thank Dungeons and Dragons for because almost every player, I'm going to say every player, but almost every player that plays tabletop RPG now can thank Dungeons and Dragons for their first time, whether they play Pathfinder, whether they play Forgotten Realms, The One Ring, all these tens and hundreds of tabletop RPGs that are out there, Blade Runner RPG, even more, all the stuff that's out there. They all probably can thank to some extent Dungeons and Dragons for allowing people to understand the world of tabletop RPG even more. I think everybody or most everybody going into a tabletop RPG saying, okay, the first time I actually played a tabletop RPG was with Dungeons and Dragons, and then they moved on from there. But I do think that as the evolvement of Dungeons and Dragons continues, and the one D and D concept is going to be either loved or hated by the community, I think we could still see a shift in the importance of Dungeons and Dragons because of the fact that there's now so many options and variables for people to go ahead and play a tabletop role playing game.
Yeah, and I think too, what this did, and I think it's going to make the hobby of being a tabletop game enthusiast, is that a lot of those third party creators who had been creating content for Dungeons and Dragons, a lot of them have decided, you know what, forget about it. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create my own system, and I'm going to
Mhm.
start creating content for my own game, and that's so exciting as somebody who is in the tabletop realm, because a lot of those people are people that I have looked to to help me understand more of the nuances that you come across in Dungeons and Dragons. So, names like Matt Colville, he's got his own game coming. Different creators are doing some really interesting and exciting stuff, and I think that there's good and bad that have come out of the situation with the Dungeons and Dragons and Hasbro. I do think it has tarnished the IP, but I don't think that it's possible for it to be killed or squashed.
No, I don't think Dungeons& and Dragons is going away anytime soon. I don't wanna give anybody the impression that that is the case. It will be the leader for many years to come despite the controversy. I
Hmm.
just think that irreparable gap I just think the inevitable gap that it already has, the dominance in the marketplace, what, 90%, or 95% or whatever humongous variation gap from Dungeons& and Dragons to, let's say, Warhammer, or let's say Pathfinder, or anything else as far as whatever number 2 is. There's such a huge gap between those heading into 2022, late 2022, before all this started, that I don't think that'll ever be made up entirely. But that gap can narrow a little bit because people may, like you said, just because the frustrations over what happened earlier this year and late last year, will start thinking about new opportunities and new adventures going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I know as well, locally speaking, as all of that was happening, you would go into a game shop looking for, let's say, a Pathfinder book, and the people working in the game shop would be like, Pathfinder, nobody plays Pathfinder. And the advice was always brace yourself, and you should probably get some core Pathfinder books in, because the next couple of weeks are going to be very interesting in your game shop. So now, a lot of those games that were maybe a little harder to find are very accessible right now when you go into a game shop, which again I think is a credit to the people who were so upset about it, and instead of just whining about it and moping about it on the internet, they went out and they searched for new things, and they searched for different games, and looking for ways to take what they had already been playing perhaps in a D&D system and transfer it over into Pathfinder, which the two systems are similar enough that it can be done with a reasonable amount of difficulty. So I think that just walking into your games shop and seeing the different games now that you may not have seen before January and early February happened, is indication enough of what is happening right now with this weird transition, but not really a transition that's happening in the consumer end anyway of the tabletop role playing game community.
So your final thoughts on this, because well, actually, it's not going to be your final thoughts because I have a feeling we're going to probably be touching on this from time to time. It's just a feeling because I know how passionate you are about tabletop RPG gaming. I know how much part of your life, Robbie Ross's life, it is. I know since I've met both of you and interacted with you and Demolition Force for years, and how much enjoyment when it's good, when it's really good, how much enjoyment you both get out of it. Any last thoughts on this for now, as far as your feelings on the D&D IP, what it's going to take to get D&D back in the good graces of some, or even many, to the point where they feel comfortable about D&D going forward?
I don't really have much of an answer for you for that question, and it's only because I am actively homebrewing my own content for the next part of the story that we're telling with particularly the Las Vegas table,
Mhm.
and I have some big plans for the Halifax table. They're going to be transitioning over into Pathfinder, so we have some uh, I educational sessions coming up, I suppose is the way to do it. Just some extra time that I get to spend with my girls back home, and as we all learn and discover a new system. So, on a personal level, I'm taking a step back from Dungeons and Dragons with the stuff that I personally run. I'm still going to be a player in people's games. I'm still going to be involved that way. But when what I run at my table is going to be less and less core Dungeons and Dragons focused.
Once again, it's the PCC Multiverse. It is Melinda Barkhouse Ross and me, Gerald Glassford. But before we head it out, it is question number 3
Mhm.
on the 3 questions. And I love this show. I love this show the way that you structured it as far as 3 questions. Although next time we do this, you've got to make sure you put out the 3 questions because the 3 questions were they hurt my head trying to come up with them.
Right? Because they have to be big questions. Because you still
Yes,
have time to fill, so they have to be
yes,
bigger questions. Yeah.
absolutely. So this one I think is going to be a good one to finish off. We just finished off the success of The Last of Us, which was such a tremendous, tremendous show. I think without a doubt, everybody out there should be saying, if you haven't already, that this is probably the greatest video game adaptation of all time. And the bar is not really that high. As you and I both have seen, especially me working in the entertainment industry, actually from my past working in special effects and actually working on a video game adaptation, Double Dragon, which I know the other day on IGN was given a shout out for being campy and so
Mhm.
bad it's good. Like we talked about with the Super Mario Brothers movie, the original one so many years ago that it's so bad it's good type of deal. I still think it's bad, but hey, I got a credit on it. So what can I say? When it comes to video game adaptations, in my opinion, and I've said this for decades, the entertainment industry has never taken it seriously, ever. They've never applied the resources, never applied the creative, I guess, thought process behind it. Even when I was working on Double Dragon, you could see the kind of costs that they were throwing out there and what they were going to get as a package as far as special effects, much less any type of cohesive action or storyline or acting or anything of that nature. You could see it wasn't going to be anything that was going to be remembered fondly any number of years from then. But when it comes to the adaptation since then, I was hoping for better. I was hoping for more. I mean, as I saw the variations in Tomb Raider, I saw the variations in other gaming adaptations. We've seen Rampage with The Rock. We've seen other types of Uncharted. We've seen
Mhm.
other types of video game adaptations over the years, leading up and into last year, which was a big year for video game adaptations with Halo and Sonic the Hedgehog 2. Sonic the Hedgehog 2 was thought of, and probably by us, is probably the best video game adaptation before The Last of Us. And that's only because it scored well with audiences as far as box office is concerned. It is not a great movie by any stretch of the imagination. It's just Jim Carrey twirling his mustache to a CGI hedgehog for close to 2 hours each and every time out. But hey, it worked. It got audiences in there, and it's actually going to bring a trilogy to a head as well. So that's going to be great to continue that franchise, a franchise which has had like 50 different variations in the gaming format and has really not achieved the same level of success. It's so funny because it has never achieved the same level of success that it did on the Genesis, even though every year we see a ton of mobile gaming or console gaming options for Sonic that is almost made regularly and produced regularly because it's the gift that keeps on giving, but it just never seems to break out the way it once did. But leave it to the movie makers, they found a way to go ahead and monopolize or make money out of a IP which again was having declining returns. That leads me into the question I have for you now, because The Last of Us has given me hope that there is a future of good to great video game adaptations, and that can be a future if Hollywood takes these video game IPs seriously. Your thoughts on this? Will we go forward in a positive way with video game adaptations? Or will we take a step back where we'll see more, as they said during the Wii era, more shovelware that is going to be at the bottom of a bin of a clearance bin that you will see at your local department store sometime soon?
I think for the immediate future, like the next couple of years, I think that it's going to be a little bit more hit and miss as people try to figure it out.
Because there is an
Um,
absolute ton of video game adaptations that are on the way.
yeah, absolutely. So you got The Last of Us, we have The Witcher, which did
That actually
exactly what.
Yeah, I don't know. Can you really say that's a yeah, it's kind of a video game. It's actually is it more of a book adaptation than a video game adaptation?
Sure, I mean, the argument can be made, but, I was familiar with The Witcher from the video games, not the
As
books,
was
so I
I, as was
yeah.
I.
So, but I think that, um, as long as you have somebody at the helm of the movie or the television show who is passionate about the game and is really doing their best to make sure that the people who play this game are going to be receptive to the content in their television show or their movie, I think we're going to be okay. But if we go back to people who just see, for example, Call of Duty and just see it as a cash grab, we're going to make this movie. It doesn't matter what it's about. They're going to
Which is
come
what
just
I'm
because it's
afraid
a
of.
title. Right. And that I think is where we've been, more often than not. So when you're seeing people like Henry Cavill come in and say, no, this is my passion, and they get involved at the producer executive producer levels where they're really making decisions that really impact the project. I think that we're going to keep seeing improvements on that kind of content, and um, I'm optimistic that this means that now that we have these examples of things as the high watermark, we now have a clear target that we're aiming for. And if you're not delivering on that level of, we're going to use the word excellence here just because it's the correct vernacular. But if you're really aiming for the level of excellence that came out of The Last of Us, then you know even if you miss it by a little bit, you're still yards ahead of what other adaptations have done. So I'm optimistic. The low bar is low, the high bar is very, very high. But as long as the majority is coming out and it's hitting closer to the high bar than the low bar, I think we're doing all right.
Because I don't include Warhammer because Warhammer is more of a origins or tabletop RPG. That's where Henry Cavill, who's helping develop the series, is his he where he developed it. I understand that he brought out video games, some really good video games, by the way, that you need
Yeah.
to check out. But it's still mainly thought of as a tabletop RPG. I still think of, and I think the Netflix creators adapted it more to the book series as opposed to what the game series. In fact, the game series in its most recent update in The Witcher 3 actually added some stuff from Netflix, which originates also from the book. So I really think more of it as a book adaptation as well. But when, like you talk about with Call of Duty, when you talk about Twisted Metal coming this later this year to
Hmm.
Peacock, when you talk about Fallout series to Amazon, when you talk about all the stuff that Sony wants to put out there with Ghost of Tsushima and also as well Days Gone, which is so funny because Days of Gone, the producer hightailed it because he said bad things about Sony, and the studio was like, they're not working anymore in Days Gone games. But hey, we'll make a television show or movie out of it. Got to go ahead and do that. You
Hmm.
got, that's kind of funny how they think of it in that concept, but can't put it out another sequel to Days Gone. How seriously they go ahead and make that game. Is it going to be something in a more popcornish fashion, or is it going to be something more of a drama type format, like we saw from Ford versus Ferrari? That was something that I
Hmm.
thought was a really good ideal and concept, and hoping to see it somewhat in that format to take the Gran Turismo concept and put it in that style. But yeah, all these different video game adaptations that are coming out, I am worried about how seriously they're going to take these future adaptations.
Well, and like I said, I think that we're at a point as well where a lot of the people who are in those producer, executive producer, writer roles are of an age where they grew up playing a lot of the games that they are now producing things for. So I
Mm.
think that that is also very helpful because you have people who understand the content they're trying to take on. And that is so important to a fandom, to understand first the IP and the story, and then be have the ability to kind of bring a story to a screen and make it compelling and make it interesting, and also have those fun little member berries that are placed through the movies and the TV shows that are almost like those inside jokes for people who have been playing the games for so long. I really do think that that's a key piece of the recipe.
Okay. Well, before we head on out, I do want to go ahead and say this is. I'm going to get on my soapbox again, and anybody who's listened to this show or our series of shows for any amount of time knows that right behind me, I've got a ton of Mass Effect, and the rumor, according to Deadline, was that Amazon has, like, they already announced a Fallout series in production, that they were also circling around a Mass Effect, but I never heard anything more. Never heard a peep. So I never heard if that's ever come to fruition or not. So maybe the price tag that would be involved, I think, is probably steering people maybe away, or steering these companies away from a Mass Effect series or movie. I would put it as a series now, thinking more about it as I do. But, it is a space opera, and it's a lot of CGI. And if you need a lot of CGI and you need a space opera and you need a lot of stuff that goes into it, it is going to have to be done well, and it's going to have to be very expensive in order to come across. So I understand there's probably a little bit of trepidation, but if Netflix or Amazon, if Disney jumps all over this, I could really see something special. And if it's really done well, in the same vein as The Last of Us, as far as how seriously they took the material. I mean, if they bring the guy behind the Mass Effect series, they bring the guy behind it, Casey Hudson, and did it in the way that Neil Druckmann has done it, working with the showrunners of the actual series. They could really make something special out of this, and really make something that could branch off into a universe all of its own. I was going to ask you the question about what series or game IP that you would put onto the screen, but I already know that answer, because this is something that's very passionate for you, and actually something that could, in its own unique way, and not just an animated way. As an animated series, I know it would work, but as a live action way, it would also be a costly series because you'd have to do a lot of CGI too. But Diablo is something that I think that you would love to go ahead and see, especially with the open beta that's coming around here this weekend and all the good stuff there. I think Diablo would also present itself as a outstanding opportunity for an entertainment property to evolve beyond just the video game format.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I don't know if it exists. I can't believe that I haven't looked or thought of it until right now, but it would also make a quality RPG. It
Yeah.
must exist. It has to exist, right?
I've not seen it as a tabletop RPG,
I've
so
not I've not looked either. But man, that would be yeah, that'd be great. You'd have your
you might want
area. Oh my gosh.
you might want to talk to Free League about that.
Yeah, I'm just gonna write a strong, well, not a strongly worded email, but a strongly suggested email. Hey, how about this?
Okay.
So, but yeah, I think that Diablo, as an IP making a transition to movie or television, would be incredibly difficult purely because of the subject matter. I think that that would be a tough sell, really. But with the success of shows like Evil, which was such a good show, and I'm sad that I haven't been able to watch it because it moved to a service that I don't have and it's not on regular cable anymore. That show was really good, and I thought that the tone of the show was correct. I'm not saying that it's right for a Diablo game, but I think that it is flirting with what it would be to almost do like a pre-story for the events of Diablo. So that I know that um, it's just it's tough subject matter. I don't know how many people would really want to watch it besides myself and a few other weirdos out there. Shout out to my weirdos. But um, I mean, I would personally enjoy seeing it. I don't know who I would trust to do it though, outside of like a Peter Jackson, really. Um,
Interesting.
yeah, I don't know who I would trust to do it. I don't know who I would want to write it. I definitely don't know who I would want in terms of actors to be cast in it. I'm not sure. Um,
Well, I will say that it has been done as a homebrew, and I actually DM'd you the link. I think in third edition, just to let you know.
okay. Yeah.
And Critical Role did, I guess, do a live actual play of Diablo
Hmm.
in and of itself. But if you ever want to delve into it, you're going to have hopefully something that you can go ahead and, as far as a team to send to Diablo, as far as to the levels of hell, so to
Right.
speak, with the world of Diablo. So, yeah, could be something very interesting indeed.
Absolutely. And I guess with D&D and some of the lore that they have, it'd be really easy to write it for, the 5e system, I think. So, I mean,
Mhm.
it just made sense. I just have never looked for it. It's so weird that it had never occurred to me to have a look for it. Anyway, yes, I would like to see it. I don't know who I would trust to write it. I don't know who I would trust to produce it. I don't know who I would trust to be in it, though. And I think that's the problem, and that's the key, with, great versus okay video game adaptations.
And see, that's the thing though, with Henry Cavill possibly taking on the Call of Duty series, and he's already doing Warhammer, his once rumored look, and it actually was a actual social media post that he was actually looking at a screenplay of a possible Mass Effect series and or movie that happened, I think, 2 years ago. I think it was in 2021 when it actually posted, and he put it on his own social media account. People were getting all excited about it. I think that maybe that ship might have come and gone, which or ship might have sailed per se.
Mm,
So I'm still hopeful that a Mass Effect series can be done, and I'm going to say it until my dying days, probably, unless it comes to fruition. I think it's the next big video game adaptation after Fallout. I think that you're going to have so much that people are going to like or dislike or go see as far as Gran Turismo, Twisted Metal, and some of the other stuff that's out there. But I think Fallout is going to be something that I think Amazon takes seriously. So I
mhm,
think that's going to be something that might pop with audiences. But I think Mass Effect, especially with the Mass Effect game coming in the next maybe 2, 3 years, I know they're working on it. It could be something that if it does pop, you'll see more interest into it by then. But I'm hoping before then that we'll actually see a Mass Effect universe created in an entertainment format. That's just my hope. I think it just
yeah,
bodes well for a space opera epic type deal because Halo, unfortunately, has not fit the bill for me in any way.
yeah. That was kind of a dud.
Yes, yes, it
Yeah.
was.
Mhm.
But what are your thoughts out there on video game adaptations after The Last of Us was so successful, did so big, it was such on a large scale, did so well with audiences? What are your thoughts? Is the industry now going to take video game adaptations more seriously, or do you see it reverting back to the way it once were, where it was just making the quick dollar and then going home? Please share us your thoughts, popculturecosmos at yahoo.com. My friend, I've got some extra question. I got an extra question I have for you.
Okay.
It's something I touched on with TJ Johnson in regards to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I
Okay.
want to hear your thoughts on this because you are a more casual audience. You're not as hardcore MCU watching as everybody else, and that's as not everybody else, as the hardcore such as myself that has to catch every episode, that has to catch every installation. We recently saw the returns for Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania as after a initial good, very good weekend plummet substantially because of bad word of mouth. And that's not the way you want to kick off phase 5. And after a very incoherent phase 4, I have concerns about the Marvel Cinematic Universe going forward being that event watching for people out there, especially by the time it gets to Kang's Dynasty and also Secret Wars later on in Phase 5 and Phase 6. Your thoughts on this as someone who is a casual viewer of the Marvel Cinematic Universe? I want to hear your thoughts on, where have they gone astray and can they regain that type of interest for casual audiences once again in the Marvel Cinematic Universe? Or are we at a crossroads?
I think Crossroads might be the answer here. I it's very difficult to convince people that they should care about a character that they've not heard of. And I think part of the magic, particularly with phase one, were the names of the people playing the characters that somebody might not be interested in. I might not have known who Iron Man was, but I absolutely knew who Robert Downey Jr. is. And perhaps based on that, I may have gone and checked out the Iron Man movie as the first one that really kind of kicked everything off. So, after that, you've got Chris Evans joining, you have Benedict Cumberbatch. The list goes on and on and on for all of those really incredible actors. And I think that part of it is um, their absence from this phase, and I think that that's what they're fighting against because there's an expectation of audience, and when you're not meeting those expectations, I think that that's when you're going to start to suffer and see things like what happened with Ant Man, which is terrible because I adore me some Paul Rudd. Come on.
But you weren't that excited to see it, especially after hearing the bad news and the bad response of it.
Yeah, and that's I mean, as much as am I gonna go to the movie theater, to see a movie that I've been hearing kind of, reviews about? No, I'm not, but I will absolutely give it time, when it's streaming. If I have to put actual pants on and leave my house to go and see a movie that I'm hearing is only kind of meh, just so I can stay current in conversations about it, it's not enough.
Well,
It's
you do
not
have
enough.
lots of you do have lots of choices right behind you as far as those pants are concerned.
Yeah, yes, there are a few fair pits. I mean, there's dresses too that I could wear. I'm not opposed to wearing a dress to go to the movie theater, but um it's just, you really have to convince me these days to leave my house.
Agreed.
And those, fifth phase, sixth phase movies, they're not convincing me yet that I need to leave my house. I like my house.
What did the fourth phase 4,
Yeah.
do wrong for you? Where did it go astray for you? I mean, I when I talk to people about it, I think there was just too many introduction movies. I think these introductions should have been part of a larger, more familiar movie, show, or concept. I think that the way that Hawkeye did it, as far as introducing characters or reintroducing characters onto the screen, outside of the very familiar Hawkeye Jeremy Renner storyline and his redemption and retribution, and the way he was still recovering from the after effects of what happened in the previous phases of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I really think that that was done so well. It is by far and away for me, outside, okay, that and Loki, but far and away for me the best of the Marvel Cinematic Universe on television because it told a narrative, but also introduced new characters that going forward will be able to go ahead and expand the MCU even more. I think that it was not reliant on introducing new characters. It was actually doing a lot of things and it did all of those things well. When it comes to the rest of phase 4 though, it was a lot of introduction movies, and I think people got tired of being able to see all these new faces and just maybe wanted to see, like you said, more familiar ones.
Yeah, and I think that, having Iron Man, what's Iron Heart?
Yes,
Is that
Ironheart.
yeah, okay, so if you don't have Iron Man show up, at least for a little bit in the Ironheart movie or show or whichever is coming, um, then that's doing a disservice to Ironheart because it's almost I see it almost as a passing of the torch at this point from the the Avengers cast to the cast of players who are coming in now. And I think that audiences need to see that. They need to see that happening on the screen, and they need to see that this isn't a replacement for, this is just a new version. And I don't know, that's not the right way that I want intended to put it, but um, you know, Ironheart is not the new Iron Man. That's not the correct way to think about it, I don't think. It's a separate entity, and it's going to be dealing with a lot of the same stuff, genius, robotics, all of that. But I think that the passing of the torch from those original actors to the new actors is key. I think that that's really very important. It's important to audiences. Gives them also an opportunity to say goodbye. This has your stamp of approval. I'm going to give it some time
So where do you think they've gone wrong? Where do you I
now.
mean, I've obviously you've and I've spoken to you over the years now on the show.
Yeah.
you do not have the same interest level that you once did. I don't even have the same interest level that I once did because of how much the MCU has gone astray from telling an overarching narrative in all of its programming. It's the phase 4 after when I look back on it, I only now seemingly had to watch it for this show. I didn't have to
Yes.
watch all those shows and movies in order to go ahead and understand what's going on in the MCU. And I felt that in a way, I feel cheated
Hmm.
out of almost, I don't want to say time wasted, but some of those movies weren't very good. So I really have not the highest of things to say about Phase 4. But in your case, I've heard it from you directly over the years on this show that you've not been pleased with the way that Phase 4 extended itself out. So where did it all go wrong?
But I think that it's just as simple as the way the stories were being told, and perhaps it's just the sheer volume of it at this point, where it just kind of became not it didn't feel urgent for me to go and see the movie anymore. It didn't
Mhm.
feel important for me to get there on opening weekend because I wanted to be part of the water cooler talk at the office.
Right.
Or I didn't have to go see the movie on opening weekend because when I watch Shield the following week, it's going to have giant spoilers if I haven't already seen the movie. I think that there's just a lot of things like that that it feels like there's a vacancy now in these phases, including phase 4.
Now that's disappointing to hear that from you because you're the individual that they want to covet the most. They want your dollars and your interest the most. And if you're not excited, that tells me that a casual audience is not excited about what's coming up in the future for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. They may go ahead still in large numbers attend Guardians of the Galaxy coming out in early May because it almost seems like a rite of passage. Let's go see a Marvel movie at the beginning of May. Let's go, because it's always going to be there. Like death, taxes, and a Marvel movie at the beginning of
Mhm.
May, right around my birthday. So I want to say that I'm still very trepidatious about what's coming up, and you could what generally is coming up in the distant future or the not too distant future for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. If you were to change things to make it more appealing to you, what would you change about what would be coming up in the next couple of years for the Marvel Cinematic Universe?
I would I don't know what is happening in the Guardians of the Galaxy movie. I don't know what the storyline is going to be. I don't even know that I've recently watched the trailer. So just bear with me for a second as I kind of thought myself through this.
Hmm.
Um I think a really good thing to do would be to introduce one or two of the characters coming with movies directly after Guardians of the Galaxy in the Guardians of the Galaxy movie. I think that that would just be smart planning. And I think that having the characters, reference or talk about or give a glimpse of some of the more well known characters in these movies at this point is important. And um, it doesn't feel like anything is cohesive. It doesn't feel it just feels like now they're putting out movies because they know that it's a cash cow and they know that the movies are going to make money. That's how it feels.
Hmm.
I know that that's always the point, but it doesn't feel like I'm getting anything in return for my dollars and my time spent sitting in a movie theater watching these movies anymore. I don't feel like I'm part of an inside conversation because I saw the movie before three of my friends did. So there's no urgency to tell them to get to the movie theater so we can talk about it because I don't want to spoil anything. That
Hmm.
sense of urgency just isn't really there anymore. And it just kind of lands in the meh pile for me.
And that's a shame because it just seemingly is not connecting now with a larger audience, which takes away from maybe its style of movie making, and maybe that's good for the entertainment industry that the superhero movies are not connecting with a worldwide audience was once they did. I know that the tours of the industry, the famous directors and actors that have voiced their opinions against the success of the Marvel Cinematic Universe are probably now rejoicing at the fact that it's not doing as well. I think that's great for them, so that they feel like their projects or their products can be now viewed by a larger audience, which may now turn its attention to them. But for Disney, this can't be a good sign because you've bet a whole bunch of money on Star Wars and a whole bunch of money on Marvel, and you don't have a whole lot behind it to cater to our generation, our demographic, as far as adults are concerned. You still have a
Mhm.
ton for the kids, but outside of the nostalgia that you touch on when you watch Disney Plus with the Emperor's New Groove and Hercules and all that, after Star Wars and Marvel, there's not a whole lot to go on as far as new IP that's getting a lot of interest at Disney and Disney Plus.
Yeah, and I know that, Moonlight or Moon Knight, sorry, had not the greatest reviews, but I really enjoyed the program. But I have seen nothing that indicates that I'm going to see him in these movies that are coming.
Yeah,
And maybe I have
nothing.
just missed that. But like
No,
that's
there was nothing indicated in that series that it was tying itself into the larger MCU, and I thought that was a serious mistake.
absolutely. See, that's an opportunity that they absolutely would have capitalized in phase 1, phase 2, even phase 3.
Mhm.
But they're missing that now. They're starting to drop that ball. I think there's an assumption that because this is a Marvel movie, it's going to do well. It's action hero. It's all of these things. So it's guaranteed to do well. But that's not what people were going to the movie to see. People were going to the movie to see how the events of Moon Knight and bringing Moon Knight into, a I don't know, off the top of my head, like a Captain America movie. How did those two interact together, and what kind of story are you going to see out of that movie? That was what was interesting. That's what was compelling. But now, they're putting stuff out. It feels like just for the sake of putting things out. They're not tying things together. They're not making it interesting. There's not really an opportunity for characters to cross over right now and have any kind of friction or disagreement between the main characters of these movies and TV shows, and that's just something that I really enjoyed seeing when I was looking at those movies in the first, second, and third phases.
So let's say the Marvel Cinematic Universe does see a decline in interest from
Mhm.
both larger and smaller audiences, the hardcores and also the general audiences at large. With the adaptation of the new CEOs with James Gunn and Peter Safran on the DC end of things, do you see the fan base shifting towards the DC universe? I don't per se, other than what it is already. I still think it's going to be based off a quality movie or film in a row, plus telling an overarching narrative, which you will not get until really James Gunn's movies start to come out. You won't see any of that till then. And by then we could see again, it's a lot of the stuff that he has on his plate as far as Swamp Thing and some other couple of the other movies on hand may not be the most attractive to a larger audience, but we'll see. Obviously, we didn't know that about Guardians of the Galaxy, and look where it's come to as far as a third adaptation expected to do $100 million plus at the box office easily with no questions asked. But do you see the audience that may be declining over the years that were once there in phase one, two, and three? Do you see them transitioning over and becoming more interested in the DC product outside of a Joker that does over $1 billion and a Aquaman that
Suicide
does a
Squad.
$1 billion. Yeah,
Yeah.
Suicide Squad, which was received great as far as HBO when it came directly to HBO, and obviously achieved a lot of acclaim in and of itself, which probably was part of the reason why he got him the job as CEO for DC. But do you see that marketplace for superhero movies shifting, or do you see it just dissipating into something else that people will become interested in?
Yeah, I think it's dissipating, really. I think audiences have been burned so many times by a DC movie. Grand promises, under delivering, seemingly pretty consistently.
Mhm.
I think that it's a hard sell and it's an uphill climb for Gunn, and I do not envy his position. Robbie and I like to do thought exercises. It helps you quick, no, think faster, helps your improv, all of that kind of stuff for running games. So we often play this little game together, and we're like, okay, so you're James Gunn. You walk into DC. You have a whiteboard on the wall. what are your plans? What do you do first?
My
And
famous whiteboard.
yeah, I have no idea how he's going to take this and straighten it out with the baggage that DC has hanging on to it right now. And um I'm interested to see where it's going to go, but it's going to take me a James Gunn movie or two in the DC universe before I trust it enough to put my money and my time at the box office for that movies or those movies in particular.
I can tell you how I would have done it. You know, his
Mm,
gods and monsters, the characters that he chose, that's fine. And the placement of the movies for those movies, keep them where they're at. But it's the placement of the movies that he didn't have control of, the movies that were already in production or are being produced at this point in time.
yeah.
I think he should have reorganized those. I think Aquaman should have been up front. I think Shazam maybe held to the back or put that to HBO because I don't think that's going to do well overall as far as the end of its box office run. I really think that as far as the Batgirl movie or that was supposedly going to come out, I think that should have been released to HBO or something just to try and get some interest of it. I know it was a great tax break for HBO and Warner Brothers, so ultimately, you know, dollars dictate what's going to be happening out of it. But I think the Flashpoint movie, where it sits this summer, I really think that should have been where Aquaman should have been, the Lost Kingdom of Atlantis and all that stuff as far as what's going on there. I think that the Aquaman movie should have been the movie this summer, and Flashpoint after Constantine, after all these other movies that have been produced, Joker, the Joker movie, the next Batman movie, get rid of all those movies, do all those movies in the can, even the third Batman movie, as far as with Robert Pattinson, do all those
Hmm.
movies first, then do Flashpoint. If he talked about already how that's going to be a reboot of the DC universe, actually make it a reboot in the DC universe by putting it at the end of all these other pre-made or pre-organized or pre-arranged movies. Do that all first, and then boom, you start from scratch from there. And I think that probably would have been a better for me organizational wise. I mean, you've been sitting on Flashpoint for probably a year already because of the legal troubles for Ezra Miller.
Hmm.
I would have held on to it another 2 years and just made it the wipeout of the rest of the DC universe so that you could start fresh from there.
The only thing about that is, you're asking audiences to invest in movies and stories that aren't going to matter as soon as that Flashpoint movie would come out. You
Well,
know,
no, but you're doing that anyways. I mean, by watching Shazam, by watching Constantine
mhm.
next year, by watching Aquaman 2, by watching all these DC Elseworld movies or these DC related movies and animated features that are not James Gunn created, they're the same thing. You already know that they're already dead man walking. You already know that they're already an entity unless they do absolutely insane numbers that they're something that James Gunn is not going to support going forward.
Yeah, and I think that this is the time where throwing the baby out with the bathwater is the correct decision. I really do think that he should have just leveled everything to zero and he should have started over. I know with like contracts and stuff like that, things need to happen, but if he's okay, kicking Henry Cavill, Gal Gadot, who else has been kicked off of projects recently when he decided he was taking
Well,
over?
Ben
Anyway,
Affleck may come back. He's in Flashpoint, but he may come back, but only as a director, is what he's talked
right.
about.
Yeah, so, I understand that it's a big project. It's a tough project to take and try to straighten out and try to force it into some kind of cohesive story over multiple movies. If see, I don't know, but, I do think that, he has a huge task ahead of him, and I this is one time that I do not envy him and the level of work that he's gonna have to do and the level of backflips that he's gonna have to do to repair, what's been going on in the DC universe. I don't envy that level of work. I'm exhausted just thinking about it.
Oh, you and I both
Right?
indeed. But
Yeah.
been such a great conversation. I cannot thank you enough as always. but you've got some more great stuff on the way, tabletop RPG wise. So it's time to go ahead and give that magical plug that only you can give, that magical plug that only you can give. So tell me your thoughts on what's going on in your realm of the tabletop RPG world before we head on out.
For sure. So since Sunday, we are 100% back with Vampires and Vitae. We took a week off. We got word that one of our players, Margie, who's over in Ireland, she has just started to find that it's very difficult because I mean we play until 4 in the afternoon, which is just past midnight over there for her. And getting up early on Monday morning and going to work has become, pretty difficult for her. And she's starting to meet people and have a social life. And as we know in the tabletop world, you know, getting a significant other is always the death knell to a player at the table. So
Unless that significant other is DMing that table.
yes, then there may be favoritism, but that's a whole other
Yes.
thing for a whole other day. So Margie has asked that we take the opportunity to kind of write her out of our story for right now, anyway. So we're gonna take care of that on Sunday. I will say this though: if you are gonna tune into the live show. And you're watching on your computer, have your phone close to you. I know you probably will anyway, um, because there's a little bit of experimenting happening with an element of the game coming on Sunday. And there's going to be a level of audience participation that I think is going to help really paint the picture of what's happening in the game. So if you are going to join us for that live stream, make sure you have some other piece of equipment near you that you can click on a link that we'll send out to everybody and be able to listen and kind of follow along with what's happening. It's a creative way for us to get around a copyright issue, is really what it is. So that's coming up on Sunday. We're excited for that. We're going to miss Margie terribly. She's been an incredible addition to Vampires and Vitae this season. So we are going to send her away with something truly special. And of course, she's always going to have that open door to come back to the table whenever she wants. At any time. So we're looking forward to that. Wizards and Wine still chugging along. I just had a really interesting, completely homebrewed game with the Vegas table last Monday, which will be released in podcast form hopefully in the next couple of weeks. And this coming Monday, we get back to the Halifax table, and the girls are very close already in this chapter to meeting another member of the Hourglass Coven, a hag by the name of Scabatha. So we'll see how all of that shakes out this coming Monday.
Will you stop picking at those scabs?
Scabatha.
Yeah, there
Yeah.
you go. Absolutely.
Uh huh.
Band Aid wants to speak to Scabatha. That's all I'll
Yeah.
say.
Right.
But
Antibiotic ointment. Yeah.
it is Vampires and Vitae and Wild Beyond the Witchlight. You got to go ahead and check it out today at Wizards and Wine, wherever you get your podcasts, and on YouTube. Please subscribe today. And of course, Vampires and Vitae. Join the crazy crowd that's there every time out, wherever you get your podcasts, and of course, YouTube as well. Please subscribe there. Also, you can find Melinda each and every Monday whenever she can make it down there to the Demolition Force. We're in space right now, so that's the big deal going on there. They're having space fun with space battles and only Dungeons and Dragons. I wonder if the creator of Dungeons, I wonder if Gary Gygax, did I say that right?
Yep.
Gygax? Okay. What if Gary Gygax would have ever thought, you know what? Let's go ahead into space for my project, for my little D&D thing here I got going on here. Let's go ahead. Space is kind of a good thing. Let's go ahead and delve from there. I wonder if he actually had envisioned that for his series before his passing.
Probably not when he was writing the first edition of D&D. That
Okay.
probably was very far from his mind. But with the popularity of sci-fi and the natural, I think, common interest of people who are playing Dungeons and Dragons is sci-fi. So I just think that I think he would have come to the conclusion eventually. I think he would have gotten there.
It's wherever the players want to take it. So that's
That's
really
it.
it, because that's the way it should be. Players first.
Hmm.
Uh, that would lead to another D&D discussion for another half an hour. And we'll save off that for the next time D&D gets into controversy. But great to have you here again. Check out Melinda Barkhouse Ross each and every time out. Vampires and Vitae also as well. Wizards and Wine with Wild Beyond the Witchlight. Also as well, Demolition Force, and also as well, Reckless Moves at recklessmoves.com. Well, my friend, it's been a great conversation. I cannot thank you enough. Any last thoughts on all the stuff we've been talking about lately in the past couple weeks before we head on out?
Nicolas Cage as a vampire is the thing I didn't know I needed until I found out it was happening.
All right, Renfield it is, and that's coming out mid-April. Just to let everybody know, she's
Yeah.
excited for it. If you haven't heard why, go ahead and check us out here at the Pop Culture Cosmos. But yes, I know when that movie comes out that weekend, she's going to say more on it. So go ahead and check that out indeed when that happens. But it is the Pop Culture Cosmos. It is the PCC Multiverse. For the latest news and trends in pop culture, there's no better place to go than the Pop Culture Cosmos on Facebook and popculturecosmos.wordpress.com. So for Melinda Barkhouse Ross, this is Gerald Glassford. It's another beautiful day in paradise right here in the PCC Multiverse. We thank you for listening. And here's hoping you have yourself a great day. You can't yawn yet. You're not that bored yet. We've only just started here. We're going to, just for that, let's go ahead and talk another 90 minutes.
All right, let's do it.
All right. No, next, that'll be tomorrow night. We'll go tomorrow
Okay,
night on the multiverse. Okay, fair enough.
deal.